Hi everybody, welcome to another 7th grade math highlights video. This past week we kind of transitioned from our previous focus of using proportions to solve these percent problems to now using algebraic equations. Very similar to those equations that we looked at in the past in the format of y equals kx. Our equations this week kind of fit that format, and we'll look at that in a moment. So let's get into it. So our first problem, we were looking at tips. And that was kind of a big focus also this week. We looked at problems that dealt with tips, or fancy word for tips that the students learned this week, gratuity, that they used in some of our problems. So in our first problem, we're at a salon. Okay, guys kind of had a tough time with this, but we figured it out. We're at a salon. $80 was the bill. The tip that this individual gave to that person at the salon was $15. And so we're looking for the percent of that tip. So we're specifically looking for the percent. So you'll notice in our table here, it asks the students to use a proportion and an equation, which was a good review of our work with proportions from before. And then again, now our focus this week was on equations. So let's take a look at this. So first of all, let's kind of review our proportions. So our proportions, remember, we're going to follow in that template that we used in the past of we have our part over our whole, and in this case, on the other side, this is where our percent went, our percent or our part of our percent over that whole, which was that 100%. So in this case, we have, again, we're looking for a percent, so we don't know what that is. So that's why I'm putting that x over 100. And then on the other side, my whole, or as we said last week, our original price or our total price. In this case, our bill is going to represent that whole. That's $80. Our part is our tip, so that's our $15. And there's our proportion. And again, students rolled from there because we've been working in proportions all year. So in this case, they would probably use means extremes to solve that, but I'm not going to go through that right now. I'm going to instead transition now into our focus again for this week, which was again writing the equation. So first of all, at the beginning of the week, we again came up with a template, okay, for writing these equations. And if you remember last week in our proportions, we had 3 pieces in every proportion. We had our part, we had our whole, and then we had our percent. Right? Well, in this case, we're going to have that same thing. So our template looked like this. We had a percent of, and we're going to talk about that word of in a moment here. Our whole is our part. And we're going to talk about this word is as well. So first of all, so again, we got our percent. Either they're going to give us that percent or it's going to be missing. Okay? Of, and even though it's a very common word in our English language and a very small word, it's a very big word in the math world. Of, in this case, is going to mean multiply. Notice that I'm not using an x for multiplication. We talked about how x looks like a variable, and that can get confusing. So we are now, from here on out, going to use a dot, or we can use parentheses to indicate multiplication. There's our whole, and then is, another very common word in our English language. In this case, it means equals. Okay, let me get rid of some of these marks here. So in this case, again, we don't know our percent. We're looking for that percent tip. So we don't know what that is. So I'm going to put an X there. Our whole, again, our whole is our total bill, our original price, which in this case is $80. And then our part is our tip, which in this case is $15. So now, even though our focus is not right now on how do we solve these algebraic equations, that is still coming. Right now, it's just to set up that equation and then use some of our math reasoning to solve this. So we did go through some simple concepts with solving an equation, like if I'm going to get this x by itself, which is really my goal, right? I want to try to solve for x. I have to get rid of this times 80. So in math, we talk about if we want to get rid of something, we do the opposite or the inverse operation. So the opposite of times 80 would be divided by 80. And if I'm going to do it on that side of the equation, the left side of the equal sign, I have to do it on the right side because I have to keep things balanced. And again, that's something we'll talk further about down the road here. So now, how did it get rid of the times 80? Well, 80 divided by 80 is 1. And 1 times x is x. And I did my job. I got x all by itself. And now, all I have to do is divide 15 divided by 80, which in this case is going to give me an answer of 0.1875. Now here was the tricky part, okay? That 0.1875 is not my answer. That's my decimal. And last week, we spent some time on converting between decimals, fractions, and percents. And we had a quiz on that last week, Thursday. And now students are seeing why we did that, why we spent so much time on that, because now they're expected to know, how do I convert that decimal to a percent? Well, since I'm going from a decimal to percent, the math behind it is I'm going to multiply by 100. And that 100 stands for that percent again, per 100. So if the shortcut for multiplying by 100 is all I have to do is move the decimal over 2 places. So my answer is 18.75%. So this individual who gave $15 on an $80 bill would have given 18.75%. Okay? So there's one problem. Let's look at one more. That's a little bit different than this one. Okay? So the next problem, we're looking at more of a spa, where we have a massage therapist and a manicurist, and we're going to focus right now on this manicurist. Now in this problem, they did give them the percent of the tip. Okay, in the previous page, they told them that the tip was going to be 18%. And you'll notice that up here it says desired gratuity. There's that fancy word for tip, gratuity. Well, what that means is this is what the manicurist is wanting to get. This is how much they want to get for a tip. Now, students are blown away that somebody would get a $150 tip. So we talked a little bit about how sometimes in these spas, you could actually get a tip like that. So in this case, this manicurist wants to get a $150 tip. Okay. And so I'm going to use that, what is given. Again, 18% is the given percent for the tip. $150 is the amount of tip. So in this case, you'll notice the whole is missing, or what is the total bill. So first, again, they were asked to use a proportion. So we'll start with the proportion. Okay, we're going to set that up again. 100 is going to be in every one of those proportions. Again, this time I'm given the percent, so I'm going to put that percent over 100 because percent means per 100. So 18 over 100 means 18%. Over here, again, they're giving me the $150. That is my part. That is the amount of the tip. Okay, and I am missing my total bill. So in this case, this is now what's missing. And again, I let students take it from here. We've had plenty of practice with solving proportions. Again, since these numbers aren't exactly compatible, probably I'd use means extremes, but we're going to go right into now the equation and our focus this week. So remember, we just talked about that template of a percent of a whole is a part. So, and I'm going to write that back up here again. So percent of my whole is the part. Okay, so now again, remember that of meant times, the is meant equals. So my percent, again, they gave me the percent. Now, we also did talk about a little bit more specifically when we wrote this template down. We actually didn't just write percent. We wrote percent as a decimal. So write it as a decimal. And we're doing that to save ourselves time and help ourselves out a little bit. So instead of writing 18 or 18%, I'm going to put 0.18 because 18 is not the same thing as 0.18. And 18 is not the same thing as 18%. So that was the discussion that we had. So we had to convert that percentage right away to a decimal before we wrote it into our equation. Okay, and again, of meant times. Our whole in this case, we don't know. We don't know what the total bill is. So notice the variable changed. Before, it was here by the percent. Now, it's where my whole is. Okay, and now is my part is my tip or my desired gratuity, okay, $150. So there's my equation. And again, we have to get X by itself. That's our goal, to figure out what that is. So we have to get rid of that times 0.18. So we're going to do the opposite of times. We're going to divide both sides by 0.18. And so now that 0.18 divided by 0.18 is 1. 1 times X is X. And over here now we have 150 divided by 0.18, which is going to give me an answer of, let's see, what do we get here? $833.33. Okay, so again, some students made the error, and this is a common mistake. Instead of putting divided by 0.18, they put 18. And when they did that, they got a very strange answer. And this is where we looked at using our common sense, looking at our answer. Does your answer make sense? So when students did that, they could see, oh, well, that answer doesn't make any sense. And they could go back and say, oh, that's right. I never converted my percent to a decimal. And those are those little checks and balances that we're using. So now, how does this tie into, like I said earlier in the video, that equation y equals kx? Well, in our next part of what we did this week, you will see how that comes about. So in our next section, and how we ended the week, students were given the equation. So instead of writing the equation, students were actually given the equation. So in this case, the equation says this. Okay, so it says, suppose a room service waitress at the Sun and Sand Resort receives gratuity, so a tip, represented by the equation G equals 0.15B, where G is the gratuity, or the tip, and B represents the bill. So G is my gratuity, B is my bill. So let's back up a little bit. A few weeks ago, we had been working on this, where that K represented the constant of proportionality. That Y represented my dependent variable, and the X represented my independent variable. So now we got to take all that stuff from the past to tie it into where we're at right now. So if you look at this problem, my gratuity is my Y. So I'm going to put G in there. Okay? My constant, in this case, they're telling me is 0.15. And X represents the bill. That's my independent variable. And so if we think about it, this makes sense. How much I pay for a tip or gratuity depends on how much my bill is. And as you can see, my gratuity is 15%. So 0.15 as a percent would be 15% of my bill. And notice that I use those words is and of again. Okay, right here, this is multiplication going on. So now we can see how this, well, again, what we did in the past ties into what we're doing right now. So in this problem, it says if the food bill is $19, how much is the tip? Now this is a pretty straightforward problem, so I'm going to put that 19 in for my bill because they said that's my bill. So now I have G equals 0.15 times 19, or 15% of 19, and that's my gratuity. So that's how we ended the week. Next week, we're going to continue on with some more real life scenarios dealing with percents. We're going to start off the week talking about simple interest. So students are going to learn a little bit about the loan process and how you pay off that loan. And then we're going to move into a couple more scenarios like commission, and then some other issues dealing with markups and markdowns. So we're going to try to wrap up this unit this next week. And we're looking at having the test probably next week, or this week, by the time you watch this video, this week, Thursday. And then to end the unit, I told the students, kind of prep them on this, we're going to end this unit with a little project where I'm going to ask the students to do some things dealing with all of these different scenarios we've been dealing with, like simple interest that we're going to get to this week. We're going to make it real for them. We're going to look at how it's going to apply to their life. And we'll be talking about that project in the near future here. So look forward to another good week upcoming, and we'll see you next week. Bye.